Welcome to Deep Dive Devotions, where each day we slow down and dig into one chapter of the Bible, exploring its meaning, its context, and what it shows us about God and His work in our lives. Today's reading is from Genesis chapter 19. We're going to walk through one of the most intense and sobering stories in the Bible, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. It's a heavy chapter, but it really shows us the seriousness of sin and at the same time the incredible extent of God's mercy toward people who frankly don't always deserve it. We pick up the story right after Abraham had that famous conversation with God, pleading for the city to be spared if there were even 10 righteous people found there. Now, the two angels who were with God arrive in Sodom in the evening. We find Lot, Abraham's nephew, sitting at the city gate. This location is incredibly significant because in ancient times, the city gate wasn't just an entrance, it was the courthouse, the marketplace, and the center of civic life. Sitting there meant you were a person of influence, a civic leader or judge. This tells us that Lot hadn't just moved near Sodom. He had fully integrated into its society. He sees these strangers and immediately jumps up to show them hospitality, urging them to come under his roof. There is a frantic, nervous energy to his hospitality that contrasts sharply with the calm, majestic welcome Abraham gave the visitors in the previous chapter. Abraham ran to meet them out of joy. Lot seems to be running to them out of fear. He knows what this city is like. He knows the dark underbelly of the culture he has chosen to live in, and he knows it isn't safe for visitors to be out in the open square at night. He effectively compels them to come in, understanding that the town square is a place of danger, not rest. The situation escalates terrifyingly fast. Before the visitors can even settle in or wash the dust off their feet, the house is surrounded. The text makes a specific and disturbing point to say, it was the men of the city, both young and old, from every quarter. This implies that the corruption wasn't isolated to a few criminals or a bad neighborhood. The moral rot had spread through the entire culture, spanning every generation. From the youth to the elders, the society was united in its depravity. They demand that Lot bring the visitors out so they can abuse them. This isn't just a lack of hospitality, which was a major sin in the ancient Near East in itself. It is aggressive, predatory violence. It represents a total collapse of natural law and human decency. Lot goes out to reason with them, shutting the door behind him. And here we see just how compromised Lot has become living in this environment. He tries to protect his guests, which is a noble instinct, but the solution he offers is grotesque. He offers his own daughters to the mob to appease them. This is absolutely horrifying to our ears, and it should be. It shows us that while Lot was a believer, Peter calls him righteous. In the New Testament, his moral compass had been severely damaged by living in Sodom. He had become desensitized. He is trying to negotiate with evil, attempting to trade one sin for another to keep the peace. And the Bible shows us clearly that you just can't do that. The mob turns on Lot, mocking him for being an outsider, a sojourner, who thinks he can judge them. They essentially say, we let you live here, and now you want to tell us what to do? It's a classic reaction of the world to moral correction. They reject his authority immediately and move to break down the door to get what they want. At this moment of total crisis, when Lot is about to be crushed by the crowd, the angels step in. They reach out, pull Lot back inside the safety of the house, and strike the mob with blindness. What's chilling is the reaction of the crowd. Even after being struck blind, a supernatural event that should have terrified them into repentance, they continue groping for the door, trying to break in. It's a powerful, almost diagnostic picture of what sin does to the human heart. It blinds us, yet we continue to pursue the very things that are destroying us. They are physically unable to see, yet their obsession with doing evil drives them to exhaust themselves trying to find the door. They are completely irrational, enslaved by their desires, even when God has put up a clear, supernatural barrier. The angels then drop the hammer, They reveal their true identity and mission, telling Lot that the outcry against the city is so great that God has sent them to destroy it. This confirms that God sees the suffering caused by sin. He isn't aloof. The angels give Lot a chance to save his extended family, telling him to gather anyone he has, sons-in-law, sons, daughters, and get them out. But when Lot goes to warn his future sons-in-law, they think he's joking. The Hebrew suggests they thought he was playing or jesting. They treat the judgment of God like a comedy routine. This is often the way the world reacts to the warning of judgment. It seems too radical, too extreme to be real. To them, life was normal, eating, drinking, marrying, and the idea of divine wrath seemed like a fairy tale. As morning breaks, the urgency ramps up significantly. The angels tell Lot to move, but Lot lingers. This is one of the most important and puzzling details in the chapter. Why does he hesitate? The text doesn't explicitly say, but we can imagine the conflict. Maybe he's worried about his possessions, his accumulated wealth, his status in the gate, or perhaps he is paralyzed by the thought of leaving his home for the unknown. Or maybe he just can't believe it's really happening. Regardless of the reason, he is paralyzed. So the text says the men seized him and his wife and his daughters by the hand, the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him out and set him outside the city. We have to catch that phrase, the Lord being merciful to him. The mercy here is physical force. Lot isn't saved because he was heroic or decisive. He's saved because he was literally dragged out by the grace of God against his own hesitation. If it were up to Lot's own willpower or decision-making, he would have died in the city. It's a perfect picture of salvation. We are often dead in our trespasses or paralyzed by our sin, and we don't save ourselves. God grabs us and pulls us to safety when we are too weak, confused, or attached to the world to move. Once they are outside, the command is simple and stark. Escape for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the valley. They are told to flee to the hills to avoid being swept away. But Lot, even now, is still bargaining. It is almost frustrating to read. He argues that the mountains are too far and he might die before he gets there. He asks if he can just go to a small nearby town, Zoar. The name Zoar actually implies small or insignificant. Lot is essentially asking, can't I just keep a little bit of my old life? Can I just go to this little city? It's amazing that God listens to this request. It shows God's incredible patience with weak faith. He is not a tyrant. He works with Lot's frailty and grants the request, sparing the town of Zoar for Lot's sake. Lot flees there, and the sun rises over the land. Then the judgment falls. Sulfur and fire rain down from heaven. This isn't described as a natural disaster like an earthquake or a volcano. It is a direct, supernatural judgment from the Lord out of heaven. The destruction is total. The entire plain, the vegetation, and all the inhabitants are wiped out. It reminds us that God is holy and that he will not let evil go unchecked forever. There is a limit to his patience, and when judgment comes, it is comprehensive. In the middle of this destruction, we have the tragedy of Lot's wife. She is following behind Lot, and she violates the one specific command given to them. She looks back. Immediately, she turns into a pillar of salt. Jesus warns us later in the Gospels to remember Lot's wife, making her a permanent signpost for believers. Her looking back wasn't just a glance of curiosity or reflex. In the biblical context, it implies a look of longing and desire. She was leaving her body in safety, but her heart was still in Sodom. She couldn't let go of her old life, her home, and her friends to embrace the stark, empty salvation God was offering in the wilderness. She is a warning to us not to cling to the things of this world, our stuff, our status, our comfort, when God calls us to move forward in faith. Meanwhile, we get a scene change to Abraham. He goes to the place where he had stood before the Lord and looks out toward the city. He sees the smoke rising like the smoke of a furnace. The narrative tells us that God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow. This confirms that Lot's rescue was, in many ways, an answer to Abraham's intercessory prayer. It's a profound comfort to us that our prayers for our loved ones who are lingering in dangerous places are heard by God, and He often acts in their lives for the sake of His faithful ones. The chapter ends on a very dark, depressing note in a cave. Lot is afraid to stay in Zoar, the very place he begged to go, because he now fears the destruction will catch him there too. So he moves to a cave in the hills with his 2 daughters. The trajectory of Lot is tragic. He started the chapter sitting as a judge at the city gate, a man of importance and wealth, and he ends up hiding in a hole in the ground, having lost his wife, his home, his sons-in-law, and his wealth. He is reduced to nothing. His daughters, traumatized and isolated, think the whole world has been destroyed, or that they are now so cut off that they'll never find husbands. They hatch a sinful plot to preserve their family line through their father. They get him drunk and commit incest with him on successive nights. It's a gross, tragic end to the story, and it serves as a final commentary on the lingering effects of Sodom. It shows that while you can take the people out of Sodom, it's much harder to take Sodom out of the people. The daughters' worldview had been twisted by the culture they grew up in. They resort to pragmatism over morality, justifying the means by the end. The children born from this act become the Moabites and the Ammonites, nations that would later become bitter enemies of Israel, constantly tempting them toward idolatry. The story of Lot is a cautionary tale. It shows us that God rescues the godly from trial, as the New Testament says. But it also shows us that playing with fire, living too close